What's up, nerds? Welcome back. Today I'm talking about King Spawn number one of our first steps into the Spawn universe, and so far it's looking pretty good. So, as you can tell, I have been a fan of Todd McFarlane's work for a while. I mean, granted, he was doing stuff before I was probably even born, I'm pretty sure. But I mean, the thing is, his work has always been so solid, and then just his work ethic in general has led to him being a millionaire just off of the strength of his own will. Like, if you just actually look at Todd McFarlane's career, pretty much everything that happened was because he at some point decided, I'm going to make it happen. It was no him failing upwards or just lucking into some scenario. It was always him making the conscious decision, I'm going to go and do something. And then he just went and did it. So, I mean, that right there has always just been an inspiration to me that you. And then the other thing is, he actually puts in the effort. He also talks about that. He actually puts in the effort. Like when he wanted to be an artist, he talks about all the times that he got rejection letters and how he just kept practicing his art and practicing his art. And that's the most important thing, that you have to actually put in the effort. You have to put in that work. So, I mean, the man has earned it. And now we're seeing it start to pay off in a whole new way, because he has been really, I mean, he's always stuck with the Spawn thing. He's been trying to get the movie done for decades at this point. But I mean, the thing is, he's always also kept up with the comics, and that he not even when he wasn't writing it and drawing it, he still kind of always kind of had his hand in it. And then of course there are always all the merchandising stuff, like the toys and everything. He's always been very big on all of that. So, I mean, this is where we finally see him. He finally made the decision. He's going to go ahead and do the whole universe thing and have expanded different spawns and everything and bring them all together, which, I mean, has already, it's been a thing before. But I mean, before, the different kinds of spawn were usually an offshoot series and things like that. And then there were some things in the actual main series. But I mean, for the most part, you always just had Spawn was Spawn, right? Now we're finally starting to see crossovers and stuff. And this is where we're actually starting out. There's actually this is thick. This is a thick book. So, I mean, there are a few different stories in here, and that's the reason why. So we start out with this particular one with this guy who's coming in to teach these little kids, right? And he's asking them if they know about the Bible, and they're all kind of giving their answers. One says her mom says, or their mom says it's like a comic book, and the other one says, oh, I know there's lots of monsters, I think, in there, Mr. Reynolds. He's like, no, no monsters, just love. So before he goes on teaching them, he's like, hold on, I just need to set something real quick, and then he starts talking to them again, and then we find out, well, he did set a bomb, so that's what happened. The bomb goes off, and then we start hearing from Spawn, I believe, his inner monologue. And so we're seeing it says, the saddest part of is humanity is unaware that heaven and hell have been attacking them for centuries, sometimes just for sport, other times with specific purpose to draw out their enemy. And that's where we finally see, was it She-Spawn? And then also Al himself, the Spawn that we all know and love. So they're at this funeral service for all of the little dead kids, and they're just kind of talking about what happened and everything. And he basically lets on that this was done literally just to get his attention, to which she's like, are you saying that us just existing means terrible things like this are going to happen? And he basically just tells her yeah, that's, it kind of comes with the territory. So she's like, well, I need to wrap my head around that. But can we just go ahead and pay our respects, it's the least we can do or whatever. But then, well, before she can actually say anything else, she turns around and he's gone. So he does the whole Batman thing. He just disappears. So yeah, she's like, I can't deal with this now. If we're part of the reason those kids are dead, least we can do is pay our respects. And then, like I said, she sees he's gone, and then we see standing next to dirt doesn't show anyone respect. The parents need answers, and if they knew why this all happened, they'd want vengeance too. So that kind of brings us over to this little interstitial, I guess, where we kind of go online and we see some talk about what's going on online. And so we go from there, because the talk ended up being about Spawn, and Spawn ended up basically saying I'm watching you or whatever, then the person left. So that's basically where that goes. And then he goes on in his internal monologue through this little cut scene or whatever, where he's saying, time's against me. I can feel their clock ticking. The sigil also says there's a list somewhere, files with names of every shadow player stuck here on Earth, the demons and angels hiding in human skin among us, because he found at the scene of the crime, he found this little like patch of skin or whatever that had a sigil on it that has all of this information that's kind of like basically was the warning shot to him to let him know what's going on. So he's been deciphering it and everything, but he does need additional help because he doesn't understand it all the way. So he says, whoever he served, those that planned it, they want to be found. And then he says, I'm sure that bomb happy school teacher was one of them because he's talking about like the demons and everything. Because he says, hoping the media will fill the airwaves with sensational headlines about dead children, or politicians on TV saying thoughts and prayers. Fine, they can say their prayers. At some point, though, they'll realize God isn't answering any of them. So that's where we come over to this particular scene between, who is it, Raphael? I think it was Raphael. Yeah, Mr. Raphael and Miss Leviathan. So angel and demon, of course, classic combination, right? So as we can see, they're in this very like just gross relationship. I mean, they're very attractive or whatever, right? But still, knowing that they're an angel and demon, gross. So anyway, Spawn shows up and everything, and he's just kind of talking shit to them. Or they're like, "What do you want? Like, I thought we had a deal or whatever. You were just gonna leave us alone." And so he says, "I need you to read this for me, Senator." And he throws the sigil at him. And so she's trying to tell him, "Don't listen to him. He doesn't have dominion here." So he just says, "I beg to differ," and immediately just like grabs her by the neck and puts her up against the wall. So he kind of starts like well, he doesn't really bargain because he ends up telling him like, "You have no leverage here. I'm in control of this entire situation. You're going to do what I want, tell me what I need to know, and there are no questions." So he just says, "You want your satanic mistress in one piece? Do what I ask." So the dude's like, "Okay, okay, just leave her alone. If I do this, no one finds out. You don't say a word." He says, "Let's get something straight. This isn't a negotiation. I'm calling the shots. Now read." So he starts telling him it's a blueprint. It says there's a group, a terrorist cell of some kind, and some files. But the biggest part says they're following the Psalms, 137, about killing children to get their God to reveal himself. So he wants to know who's directing them, and then he tells them like, "I can't tell." He's like, "You're bad at lying or whatever." So he's getting close. He's like, "I'm gonna count," and he says one, two. So he's like, "All right, all right, all right." And he tells him, he says, "Metatron, that's who it is. It's Metatron." So that's where we see him being like, who he's on Earth, and he says, "What? You thought only warriors or agents got stuck here? No, you trapped some heavy hitters when you locked the dead zones. If propaganda is getting to people online, social media, he's dictating it." So he asks if he knows like where he might be. And he says the sigil indicates it's the same place where hell birthed you. So that means New York City. And then we go over to Metatron looking like, my God, like he literally eats hipsters in the morning as part of his dietary routine. Anyway, so we see like Spawn talking about him. He says, "I know the lore. He was born human, but somehow conned his way into becoming one of God's handpicked angels, the only human to ever do so. He ended up like I did, a pawn to be toyed with by his master. But he chose to stay an angel. That's where we differed. He actually liked being a servant, being near God, and one of his goals was always to bring the head of a hellspawn to the altar of his God. But why now? If he's been here all this time, what's taken him so long to make his move? And why use children for his bait when there's plenty of adult targets to choose from?" So that's where we see this like homeless guy comes up to him and is like trying to like bother him and shit. And he's like starts talking to him like, "Oh, sorry, I was just trying to like look at what you were looking at on your phone. What is that? Some sort of action movie and everything." He starts talking about like, what was it, Terminator, I think. And so like basically Metatron just whispers in his ear, and then the dude tells him like, "Stop yelling, like you're talking too loud." And then as he walks away, dude's head literally just explodes. So we go from there to where now we have Sam and Twitch, the detectives. They're kind of looking at the body and they're like, "Well, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, people's heads don't just randomly explode, even though that's what all of the witnesses are literally saying happened. So it doesn't make sense. What could really be going on?" So Twitch is telling him, like, "And you know me, I get skeptical when things veer this far from the norm." So Sam was like, "How are we going to handle this, Twitch? Not like we've got a bat symbol or anything." So he says he'll know. Don't know how, but he's somehow attuned to this kind of stuff. So sure enough, Spawn is going to like investigate what's going on with Metatron. So he shows up with his guns and shit, and he's going to actually like look for him. So he gets his way into like his lair or whatever, and then he busts in to find out, oh crap, Metatron has been completely disassembled, like just butchered beyond all recognition. Literally just a smear on the floor. So we get this whole nice scene. The only thing that kind of bummed me out, the only thing that kind of bummed me out here. Do you know what it was? Did anybody else catch it? I kind of figured no. I figure it's not that big of a problem because I figure not too many people reading Spawn are that big on reading the Bible. But at the same time, the fact that they misspelled Psalms everywhere on here and spelled it as P slams kind of bums me out. That's kind that I mean, and it's not the last time that happened. So that's the other reason that it kind of bums me out. Anyway, so he says someone is letting Spawn know there's a debt to settle with him. But who? Who the hell is doing this? So then we get like the famous like talking heads trope that we've always had, from the Spawn comics and everything. Always very fun trope for them to go back to. And that's kind of when they're filling us in about this like underground movement or whatever that they're calling themselves Psalms 137. Allegedly, police found biblical passages taped onto walls of the apartment. An anonymous source said the Bible passages seemed to reference children and murder. No motives have been given at this time, but there are growing concerns that these types of hate groups or cults could have memberships numbering in the hundreds or thousands, with strong cells spread across the entire globe. So that's where we get that. And then, of course, the last one, he's basically always just been like the more conspiracy theorist one. He's just kind of talking about, like, yeah, I got my guns and everything. I hope they try and come for me and everything. So we see the actual cult themselves, and they keep repeating this whole thing about like killing children and everything. So very creepy. But we go from there to where we see their leader. And this is, I think, was it here? No, it was on the other page. Yeah. So, like I said, again, in this panel right here, this particular word bubble, they put it again. They have the P slams in there. So it bothers me when people don't proofread. It really does. I've people who know me know that I'm very nitpicky about like spelling and grammar and shit like that for no particular reason. But I mean, it's just I don't know. When I see it, I can't unsee it. You know what I mean? It just bothers me, and I have to point it out. Anyway, so this is where we get like their leader talking to them. And he's saying, and so, my flock, we'll leave a pile of bodies so high the entire world will mourn. That's when he'll come, when our king will reveal himself, and we shall deliver him all the glory and all the punishment he so richly deserves. And he says, all hail King Spawn. So that's where we leave off on this like main part. I'm assuming that's going to be the main story or whatever. But then we move on to this other character known as Haunt, who I'm actually glad that they're bringing back because ever since they like basically just ended his series, like his solo series, and didn't really do anything else with it, I was like, well, that's kind of disappointing. But anyway, so we see for 5 weeks, Daniel Kilgore has attempted to live what others call a normal life. It wasn't planned, but something sparked inside him the moment he met Lydia. So we see this whole thing where they're basically just being like the happy couple and everything together. And then they go back to his place because she said she was going to cook for him. And while she's doing that, while she's prepping, I guess, she asks if he has any more knives. He's like, oh yeah, there's a whole drawer full right next to you or whatever. So we go from there to where we see, oh, she found the knives and she did manage to use just, it looks like every single one. So he's all pinned up to the wall and everything. And we're kind of like getting the fill on what actually happened to him. It says, any sense of Daniel having a normal life has been shattered beyond repair. In the back of his mind, a voice was telling him, this is all too good to be true. But he was so desperate to cling to any normalcy, he ignored those instincts. That's where we see a mysterious figure has shown up and is calling him an idiot and everything. And we see that it's actually the Redeemer. So he's starting to like pull the knives out and is telling him about basically what happened. He says, they're always looking to exploit the newborn heroes and their naivete. How's your pain? So he just tells him like shitty. So he says, you're still losing blood. That needs to stop. So he decides to go over and like use his angelic powers to actually start healing him and everything. So that starts taking its effect, and then he says, it's their oldest trick. Prey on emotions, they'll betray our logic every time. But it takes them a while to dull our senses. How long was she around you? And he says, about a month. So he says, good. They didn't get all they needed then. Otherwise, you'd be dead. But they'll be back. So he asks, like, why she would do that. He says, it's not her, it's them. All of them. You're a half-breed to both sides, part light, part darkness, just like your costume. Neither heaven nor hell will ever trust you. They'll always think you're aligned with the other side. That puts you in a bad spot. There, your bleeding has stopped. So he finishes healing him and everything, and then he asks like, well, whose side are you on? He tells him, I'm not on anyone's side because they both took something from me and made sure that I remembered and everything. So he says, so prepare yourself. Anyone who bears that symbol on your costume's chest scares them. That's why they've infected it. Your costume, beginning today, is going to slowly poison you. And then he says, why are you doing this for me? But he's like, because of your brother. If it wasn't for him, I'd truly be blind. I promised I'd repay his favor. Next time you see him, tell him we're even. So this is where he talks to the ghost of his brother. And he's like, did you hear all of that? And he says, yeah, but I don't know who that is. Yeah, he's like, I did, and I've never met that guy. I'd remember that. So that's where we leave off on that particular story. Because now we go over to the Nightmare Spawn, which is actually from the Hellspawn series. I think it was number 15. I'll put like a panel or whatever like up here. So he's that's where we're showing up. This was basically like Al when he became his most evil version of the Hellspawn. When he basically became like kind of king. He had the crown and everything. So that's basically this, but at the end of that particular story arc, like that particular suit and the wings and everything just kind of like burned away. So we're seeing this particular one is back. And so it says, are the humans aware of your presence yet? He says, no, I've been able to move our mission forward undetected. And they're asking about Al Simmons. He says he's busy chasing some of the others who fell through the hole. He'll be distracted for quite some time. So they ask him like, well, they say we'll need him soon. What if they kill him before them? And before then, he says that's unlikely. There is a handful of other Hellspawns trying to protect him. And then they say, and you're meeting that goal too? He's like, I have. So that's where we see he's actually just got finished killing like a whole bunch of angels, apparently. So he's saying, and the angels, most of them have gone soft, so it hasn't been much of an effort. It's too bad you can't see what I've done to so many of them. If what I've seen is any indication, it'll be a bloodbath. These agents of God seem unprepared or disinterested in this war. At least a large portion are. And so we can kind of see like one of them even kind of has like still feathers back there. Anyway, so we get more shots of him just looking like badass. I'm not gonna lie, like he does look really cool. Anyway, so he's kind of like busy at the moment. He's talking about like complacency, the same sin that's always held back the humans. Sadly, some who served me also fell prey to that complacency. I'm actually entertaining two of them right now. So he's basically talking to these two like followers, I guess you can call them, who basically he's saying while he was gone, they kind of just like gave in to the excesses of the world and wanted nice places to live and nice like jewelry and everything. So he says, is that all it took to want to be like the humans, to abandon me? He says, greed, your personal greed is what turned you into traitors. And they're trying to tell him, like, no, it wasn't that or whatever. So he's like, no, don't you lie to me. And so then he does this where he plucks out one's eyes, then he bites him, and then we see like this black bile starting to like come out where he says, because I can extract your black soul and make it ooze down your body. Then scoop maggots from the rotting carcass of other traitors so you can taste the sweet nectar of betrayal. And before you die, take solace. You're not alone. Others like you have also lost their way. They've been invited to this gathering too. That's where we see they're all starting to show up and they're like, oh, great. We all won this competition or whatever. So they're getting ready and they're like, it's going to be a wicked time. He's like, now I must go feed our guests. So he takes off from there. And that's where we leave off on that particular story. Because now we go over to this one called The Hero. And I'm thinking this is a new character. I don't know if I just don't recognize him or what. But yeah, this one was a little bit out of left field, but it's kind of interesting. So we see this whole thing where we're starting out on this like what is it, cosmonaut space station? Yeah, aboard Russian satellite RX 2976. So they're seeing something coming in, and then all of a sudden we go to this kid who's with his dad. He's kind of like a crime boss or whatever. And so we see this thing where he's kind of telling him, like, we're going to pick up and we're going to move again. But the kid says, no, I don't want to move. I'd rather go and be with mom. But he's like, no, your mom's not here or something like that. So don't worry about her. We're leaving. So the kid is very much upset, but he sends him with his like bodyguards, handlers, or whatever, and tells them, just like make sure the kid gets ready. So a little while later, all of a sudden, we see they're calling out. They're like, Alex, what are you doing up here? Where's Mr. Kiyomoto, who's supposed to be guarding him? And he's like, I think he's dead because he's all covered in blood and shit. So like, what? So one of the guards yells to the other one, like, we'll go and check on it and see what's going on. And he's all of a sudden just like comes and hugs the kid. Well, while he's looking at him, we see that like he just gets headshotted just from out of nowhere. So I was like, oh shit. So that happens, and then he walks into the room and sees like all of his dad's like other henchmen are also dead at the hands of this guy. So he just kind of like freaks out and asks like, where's his dad or whatever. And then the guy says, is your name Alex? If it is, we need to talk. So he just kind of like he freaks out and just as a kid would do, he takes off running and tries to get away. But of course, as he gets to a door, all of a sudden he turns around and there's the guy. So he's like starts talking to him or whatever. And he asks like, "Why'd you have to kill everyone?" And he tells him, "Not everyone, not your dad." He said like, "Dad's alive." He says, "He is, just like you wanted." And he asks, "But you killed the others." He says, "I didn't. You did." And he tells him like, "Pick up your hand and see what happens." That's where he sees like their basically movements are mirrored because he's controlling him and everything. So he says, "Your dad went to the bathroom. He'll be as shocked as you. Next time you want me, think of my name. It's Comox." So he takes off, and that's where, sure enough, his dad does show up, and he's like all freaking out and everything. And he's trying to tell his dad, like, I promise it wasn't me, like it was him. But of course, there's nobody there. And then we can kind of see where I'm assuming this is our spawn who kind of like saw everything that went down. I'm assuming. So we'll see what comes from that. And then the last story we get here is the gunslinger. So he's basically also got his own story. He came back from, as you can imagine, back in the day, back in the 1800s, because he kind of has that whole motif going on. And his name is Gunslinger. So he's from back in the year 1865. And then we can kind of see where he also had his own kind of like run in with people, with like the people who hunted him. And then they ended up like doing all, they thought they killed him. They slit his throat, shot him with arrows, hung him, and then they even peeled off his face. So you would think, yeah, dude was dead. But of course, that wasn't really the end for him. So it says, their brutal attack on him was revenge for him interfering in their sadistic plans. Gunslinger was seeking to protect his sister, Amy, nothing else. But things got completely out of control. That's why they came after him. They wanted revenge just as badly as Gunslinger did. Well, they got their shot. Now it was his turn. And he was getting close. So close he could taste their blood, but we find out he actually didn't get the chance to get his revenge because it's saying then something happened. One second he was living in the year 1864. The next he was here, 160 years in the future, robbed of his chance to exact retribution for Amy's fate. But he swears on his sister's grave he'll avenge her. He'll somehow get back to where he came from, and God help anyone who gets in his way. So that's where we kind of leave off on that story. And this is a really nice, like, just Brett. I want this as a poster. I say that about so many things as if I have the wall. I have a lot more posters to put up. I just kind of haven't gotten around to it. But I mean, I would love this. Just this design looks so nice. Anyway, so we leave off on that for right now, and that is actually going to be the end of it for now. And we kind of get these like solicitations also at the end of Gunslinger, and then also the Scorched. So we'll see what comes from all of this. Like I said, this is just basically like our first step into all of the different types of things that are happening within the Spawn universe that they're just kind of be running with for now. And it's overall it seems pretty cohesive. It looks like they know what they're going for. There is a central theme here, and then everything else is just kind of like individual players all kind of also doing their thing. So we'll see what happens from that. I'm going to go ahead and just say that I am cautiously optimistic about it. There are still several ways that this could go wrong, so I'm not going to say that I know it's going to go 100% right. It could go off the rails. We'll see. But for right now, I am excited because, like I said, Todd McFarlane just when the man wants to do something, the man does it. So I mean, if he's saying he wants to go ahead and make this just like a thing, the whole Spawn universe, and just kind of like branch out into like some sort of franchise. Well, he already has a franchise, but you know what I mean. When he really just wants to branch it out. Okay, let's see what happens. I mean, he's decided he's gonna take this tack. As with everything else, let's see if it does pan out. So we'll find out. But I mean, if anybody out there has read this, I would love to know your thoughts on it. Would love to get some feedback on this and kind of see, because I knew that this was going to be one of the like bigger books. We already heard that it was having like high sales and everything. There was a lot of anticipation for this coming out. So I'd imagine it probably did pretty well, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would like to talk about it. So I'm hoping that there are people out there who have read it and would like to talk about it. So definitely let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like the video. Make sure you're subscribed and share the video if you would like to. But if you're done here, then go and read a book, especially this one. And if not, then I'll see you on my next video.